The original 1984 Gremlins movie is about love, friendship, and responsible gift purchasing. The second Gremlins movie takes place in New York. It's 6 years later, it's 1990, and we find them in a completely different situation. The first Gremlins movie is very simple. It teaches you the 3 rules. It tells you what not to do with the gremlins. The second movie, it's a lot. The director was asked by the studio after the first movie to create a sequel for it, but he decided that Gremlins didn't really need a sequel. And then, 6 years later, they finally managed to give him triple the budget for the Gremlins movie, and then to make whatever he wanted. He was given complete artistic freedom for Gremlins 2, and this is what he created. The first Gremlins movie doesn't really tackle gender. They're humans, so obviously there's gender in there, and I'm sure there's plenty of gender politics that can be read into that. But Gremlins 2 is where gender really gets interesting. Gremlins 2 includes Greta. Greta is the first gremlin with gender. Gremlins 2 has a lot to say about gender. It was a satire of sequels, it was a satire of the original, and arguably it's a satire of 1990 society in general, or at least 1990. At the start of Gremlins, there is no gender for the gremlins. They reproduce asexually. You just spill water on them and then they have babies. There is no biological difference for the gremlin. The original Gremlins movie does not have biological sex, at least not for the gremlins. But the second Gremlins movie, they do follow that same, asexual reproduction, but there is gender. There isn't sex in Gremlins 2, at least not with the gremlins, but there is gender. And the prime example of that is Greta. Greta was created in a lab. When the gremlins break into the laboratory, they find all of these potions.
I trust that's not the brain hormone that creature's drinking.
Talk a little bit about what's going on in this room, because I think there are some fascinating ramifications here for the future.
Let's talk this over. I can get you diseases. You'd like that, wouldn't you?
No, Dr. Catheter, I think I'll pass. And I find it a little concerning that you're just offering that. Anyway. So what's interesting about Greta is that she's not born a woman. She is created. She does create this herself. She drinks the potion herself. But she's not naturally born a woman. Regardless of whether or not she identifies as a woman, this relates to what Judith Butler has to say about the innateness of womanhood, in that they don't really believe in it that much. Using Greta as an example, we can look at what Judith Butler has to say about gender performativity. Jumping off of what Beauvoir said, Judith Butler says, "Woman itself is a term in process, of becoming, a constructing that cannot rightfully be said to originate or to end. As an ongoing discursive practice, it is open to intervention and resignification." From her book, Gender Troubles. What Judith Butler is saying here is that you aren't born a woman and that you don't even die as a woman, necessarily. That your life is a gendered performance, and we're all performing gender in our own special ways. And other people may ascribe gender labels to you, regardless of whether or not you are actively performing that gender within. And you may not want people to perceive you as a certain way. There's a lot of different ways to live a gendered performance, and you can live with the more masculine side, or you can live with the more feminine side. But with every decision that you make about your body and about the way that you interact in the world, you're making a decision about how to present yourself and your gender. And we can see this with Greta. What I think is interesting is that Greta is the only gremlin that ever gets married. Greta is the only one that actually seems to be interested in a relationship at all, which is interesting because she's the only woman gremlin. There are a variety of different types of male gremlins. There's the psychos that just go around destroying everything. There is Gizmo, the lovable soft boy. There is the scientist, which is also a male, and British, surprisingly. The scientist even has goals that he delivers to the American public.
What is it that you want?
Fred, what we want is, I think, what everyone wants, and what you and your viewers have. Civilization.
Greta, on the other hand, doesn't really have any goals. For the first part, she seems to just be performing gender. She seems to just be enjoying herself, living her luxurious life. In the second part, or in the latter part, she seems to be obsessed with this man and parodying the boomer style 1950s I hate my wife jokes. The man is terrified of her, he runs away, but eventually he likes her. Now, I'm not saying that Gremlins 2 is sexist by any means. Gremlins 2 is a satire. The goal of this video is not to decide whether or not Gremlins is cancelled or whether Gremlins 2 is more sexist than Gremlins 1 or any of that. The goal is just to look at the way that Gremlins views gender. What makes Gremlins 2 an interesting movie is that it's lighthearted and it has a lot of messages about gender that are coated in irony and sarcasm, and so it's not really clear whether the messages are intentional, if they're just subliminal, or if they're meant to matter at all. What does Gremlins 2 say when we have a piece of media where there is no biological sex, but there is gender? So Gremlins 2 provides this opportunity for us to look at this imagined scenario where you are not assigned a sex at birth. No one is in the gremlin world, but then suddenly there is one more gender, you know. What does that look like? And in the Gremlins universe, it looks like these stereotypes that we currently have in our current world. So what's really interesting about gender theory and feminist theory and queer theory and all these other sorts of theories is that you can apply them to anything. So my goal for this channel is to use the feminist lens and use other lenses to look at media in a way that I don't feel like is done all the time. This video didn't have a lot of theory in it, which is actually what I was going for, because I don't always want to get stuck in the highly technical language that you can find with Judith Butler or some of these other gender theorists. So thank you for watching the Gremlins 2 feminist analysis. I'll be sure to be making videos with similar kind of content in the future, but until then, take care and have a great day.